Hello, welcome to the next module in this training classroom. Again, my name is Coach Adam Whistler with the Schriever Guarding Resilience team, and for this specific class, we'll be covering the training for a Unit Fitness Cell Manager, or a UFCM. So, for the roles and responsibilities of a UFCM, first of all, what is it? It is the manager who runs the daily operations of a Unit Fitness Cell. The daily operations of a Unit Fitness Cell include HPAs, or Human Performance Assessments, HPAs, and the Human Performance and Readiness approach for that unit that they are a manager for. This Unit Fitness Cell manager must maintain that HPA score of 72 or higher. They must complete a training session, such as this digital classroom, with the Guarding Resilience team or a live in-person classroom. And then they must submit the required paperwork. For the required paperwork, that includes an appointment letter, a written order, the security access request, which is that 2875 form, the user agreement to get access to MyFitness, and then certification of training and completing this classroom. If you don't have access to these forms, they'll all be provided as a template within this classroom, in addition to a Teams group that you could be added to as well if you need to. Or if you don't have any of these, you don't have access to those things, you're just watching this video, you could also reach out to your local Guarding Resilience team and gain access to any of these forms as well. For key responsibilities for you as a UFCM, you are able to edit due dates within MyFitness, because on that 2875, you'll be granted FAC access, which according to the DAF man was a fitness assessment cell. And then that's going to dictate the level of access or abilities that you have within the MyFitness system. So as a UFCM, you're going to be granted FAC access, which gives you that ability to change those due dates in MyFitness to align with, as we've covered in previous modules, align with the assignment from that Delta Fitness manager and the Delta commander telling that squadron or detachment when their specific HPAs are going to be due. So your role is also to review HPA scheduling and those scheduling requests within MyFitness. Generally, those are going to be scheduled either by a HPA administrator, PFL, or maybe even by you if you're serving in that role as well. But generally, you might say, we're going to schedule this on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 08. If your assignment is on the month of April, for example, maybe you're doing 3 days a week of those, and so you have recurring scheduling. Or if you're maybe a relatively smaller unit and you're going to say, we want all 50 individuals to go test at this same time, it might be a little bit easier, but your job is to manage those scheduling requests within the MyFitness system. You're also responsible to validate the documentation and upload documentation into MyFitness. That documentation includes a fitness screening questionnaire, but that fitness screening questionnaire, which is the form 4446 alpha, that 4446 alpha, also known as that FSQ, essentially should be done by the member before they arrive for that HPA. And it is the member's responsibility to fill out that FSQ within the system. So you need to encourage them and show them how to complete that FSQ so that you ensure that that FSQ is completed before they conduct that HPA. The restrictions and medical exemptions, such as their DAF Form 469s, only provided by an actual medical provider, so signed and certified Form 469s, those also need to be uploaded into the MyFitness system. And then lastly, and of course, obviously, you need to upload the score chart, the scorecard and PDF of that HPA scorecard within the MyFitness system within 5 days of the member completing that HPA. You may be given that form by an HPA administrator or sent it by that HPA administrator, but it is your responsibility to upload that and then make sure that that was completed to standard. So your job is also to keep your commander, that unit level commander, updated on health concern HPA scores, which is those scores at 59.9 or below on that score chart. You're also responsible to send those health concern individuals to the local Guarding Resilience team to get set up with a fitness improvement plan. Now, as has been covered in the first module for the key policy updates, that fitness improvement plan is now a 12-week plan for a fitness improvement to improve performance on the retest, which is actually 3 months after the health concern scored HPA. So if a member scores, let's say, a 59.9 in April, they would be due in the month of July. In that month of July is when that next HPA due date would be assigned for. after they've completed the fitness improvement plan with the local Guardian Resilience team. And then they would essentially go and be due in July and reconduct that HPA assessment. So the UFCM, the UFCM, must also know the policies for HPA exemptions, which we'll cover on the next slide, that are all listed within the SPIFMAN, and then all of the acclimatization guidelines that are also covered for a full chapter within the SPIFMAN. So we'll go over just a few of those here. When we look at HPA exemptions, exemptions come only from a provider-validated Form 469. So that 469 cannot just be handwritten and the person saying, well, my knee's been bothering me, and then they turn in that 469. Of course, that cannot happen. So it needs to be a provider-validated Form 469, such as from a physical therapist or a doctor or a local provider. Other exemptions may include, or what this exemption may mean things like a component exemption for an HPA. A component exemption, an example of that might be an individual has an injured wrist, so maybe they're on a component exemption for a no push-up profile. That exemption may be a component exemption that's a permanent exemption or a temporary exemption. If that profile is set to expire, that would actually change the overall exemptions and how that's being factored in. They would not do that push-up either way, if that was a validated Form 469 and they had that no push-up profile, they would conduct their core event and then their cardio event, and then that would be their PFA or HPA. And then, however, if that is a permanent exemption, then they would never do it again. However, if it is a temporary exemption, such as a temporary profile, then they would have to go back to doing push-ups after completing an acclimatization period after the profile has expired. So that's a little bit complicated. Let's say it like this. If a member comes off a profile in April of 2026, let's say April 15th of 2026, that profile expired, that Form 469 expired, that individual can return to training. They're to be given an acclimatization period before the next HPA due date. And then that would actually allow them to then conduct the full HPA as long as it's within their due month or within that due window for an assessment. So that's what we have to consider for component exemptions. If you have any questions on exemptions or full HPA exemptions or those temporary duty assignments, those kind of things that affect testability, the next slide will cover some more instances of that, but I highly recommend you go and read this SPIFMAN because there's some kind of complicated issues in there that could arise. But if you read Chapter 4 in the SPIFMAN, you can see there's a full chapter for acclimatization guidelines, and that'll help you essentially understand all the kind of what-if situations that could occur in the instance that someone has some sort of exemption or an acclimatization period. Different things that essentially qualify as an acclimatization period include some items listed here, but you can see that those types of things are listed also in 3.8.1.7. But then there are also, a lot of them are covered in Chapter 4, mainly and specifically the medical exemptions. So some exemptions and the acclimatization periods that must be granted are things such as a PCS to a new location. However, if a member knows that this PCS to a new location is going to fall in a window with which that they will become non-compliant upon arrival at that receiving duty station, they actually must schedule with you, the UFCM. You must complete an HPA before departing if you are able. So if there's nothing else that's preventing you from completing that HPA, that member and you, the UFCM, must be tracking that member before they PCS needs to complete their HPA before they complete that PCS move. Then for returning from a cold or a hot climate, if a member, let's say, is stationed in Colorado Springs, for example, and then they go on TDY to something like Florida, maybe they're in Florida. If they're in Florida for 10 days and then return, they are not granted the exemption or acclimatization period because they were not there for 21 consecutive days. So it has to be consecutive days departed from home station in order to be granted the acclimatization period. And the same thing would go for things like a long TDY or going on leave. It's that 21 consecutive days mark where they'll be granted the acclimatization period. Okay. Also, you will look at anyone who has, like I talked about in the last slide, that Air Force Form 469. When that exemption may expire, then that person will also be guaranteed a acclimatization period before they have to go back into doing that component or the full HPA assessment based off of whether that was either a partial exemption like we talked about, one of those component exemptions, or if it was a full PFA exemption. Then if they have that a 469, an official 469, and they came off of that profile, they would be given the acclimatization period, and then the HPA due date would be pushed to the end of that acclimatization period. So, and then finally, one other instance is something like pregnancy. The pregnancy that would last more than 20 weeks would be given a 13-month period. So then that PFA would be pushed back 13 months from the date of delivery. And so after delivery of pregnancy, then you would have 13 months after that date for the next HPA being due. Again, I think there's a lot of other instances that people may qualify for acclimatization periods or different types of exemptions. So please go read Chapter 4 if you have any questions on any of this stuff. A lot of those questions should be answered in that chapter specifically. So for the acclimatization period, to be specific, members must have 42 days or 6 weeks to acclimatize before an HPA in these instances. So that acclimatization period is 42 days or 6 weeks. So that UFCM will adjust the HPA due date accordingly within MyFitness to align with that acclimatization period. Exceptions can only occur if a commander formally directs an earlier HPA for any reason. So in summary, you as a unit fitness cell manager need to be tracking all components of your unit fitness cell, again, which includes that PFL, BCM, as well as your HPA administrators. Those are the individuals who comprise that UFC, that unit fitness cell that you are the manager for within your unit. Then you must be an NCO or above. You may have additional UFCMs appointed of lower rank than NCO, but it has to be done with supervision. And so you must have an NCO or above as the lead unit fitness cell manager, but you could also have a subordinate UFCM of a lower rank with supervision from someone that is an NCO or above. You must report to the Delta Fitness Manager. So again, we talked about that organizational chart in our first brief. Please report to that Delta Fitness Manager so that you are on the same page for everything going on within that Delta. And then you are responsible mainly for tracking HPA due dates, exemptions, BSIPs, and FIPs within your unit that you are a unit fitness cell for. So this is, again, an overall summary. If any of this doesn't make sense, please go ahead and try to read that Spiffman 362905 document, or reach out to your Delta Fitness Manager to see if they can answer that question for you, or feel free to reach out also to your local Guardian Resilience team, and we'll be happy to work with you as well. Thank you for your time. I'll see you in the next module.